super weird happening at the Flurry. Can you give a massive raise the roof roar for Youth and Alan Moore?
Thank you, and a very warm welcome to the Super Weird Happening 17. And I'm so honoured and proud to be on this stage, sharing with Alan Moore, talking all things magic.
It's completely mutual, Youth, completely mutual.
Yeah.
And it's great to be here with all of you. This is a great event.
So, everyone here is into mysteries and things, all things weird. I wanted to start off with Alan and talk about magic and mythology and archetypes.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of coming to a conclusion at this late stage in my life that actually mythology is probably more real than all of this stuff. I mean, look at it, you know? Reality can be changed into something nightmarish overnight, apparently. That doesn't really strike me as reality, or not even one that I'd particularly want to live in. But mythology, that never changes, that is constant, that is emotionally and psychologically true forever. And I think that mythology is kind of the bedrock on which all of these transient and probably faintly absurd human institutions are temporarily erected. And when they're all gone, the mythology will still be here.
Who here is practice magic? Put your hands up. Who here is interested in it? Okay, so mythology, magic, the archetypes, they're fixed, right?
Yeah, and it's like magic, as far as I can see, it's like the human default position. I think that about 7,000 years ago, when we had the cognitive revolution, I think that must have been quite strange to start having things like memories and associations and ideas. Creativity. If you hadn't got a theory of mind, that would be really spooky. Because where could those images, dreams, you know, where could those images, where could those voices be coming from, if not from some supernatural source?
Yeah.
So I reckon that magic is our response to consciousness. And I think that magic is practically synonymous with art. And I think it's practically synonymous with language. And I think that all of these four phenomena, art, language, magic, and consciousness, I think that they're four parts of the same thing, four aspects of the same thing. And so the problem is with magic, it's all this occult shit. Not to be disparaging, but it's like magic used to be science. Before, the Renaissance, then medicine, science, these were subsumed in magic. And then with the Renaissance, science, although it was a child of magic, as many of us, when we get older, we get embarrassed about our parents. So there's science in its lab coat, you know, with its sort of ballpoint pens in the pocket, you know, and corrosive stains on it. And it's really embarrassed about its mum, who is sitting in the corner. She's got like a third nipple, and she's drawing signs in the air and muttering, you know. And so science would really like magic to be nutted off at the earliest opportunity. However, we're all embarrassed by our parents, and then we end up becoming them. I mean, I read New Scientist every week, and that is full of much, much madder shit than you are ever going to read in the collective works of Aleister Crowley. I love it. I love science. But, I mean, all this stuff about, say, the many universes theory, which is, I mean, it's a patch upon a patch. We started out with Einstein's theory of relativity, which the idea that the Big Bang, or something like it, would distribute all of the stars. And then we found out that the distribution of the stars was too even. So we thought, all right, we've got to fix this. So we came up with the idea of expansion. Maybe the universe expanded really rapidly, and that's what smoothed all the stars out. And then people said, well, why did that happen just once? And people thought, yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, maybe it didn't happen just once. Maybe it happened like millions of times, and each of them ballooned into a complete universe. Now, this is something which is unprovable, is completely useless, except in the science fiction of Michael Moorcock. It's not proper science, is it? It's a fix upon a fix upon a theory. So that is not unlike all those medieval magicians and theologians arguing about what sex angels were. Science ends up becoming indistinguishable from magic. I think that at the end of the day, you're going to need some kind of reconciliation.
And yeah, especially with quantum mechanics and all that, it's all completely magic. So, getting back to archetypes and the mythology of archetypes, can we talk about the Fool and why the Fool is such an important archetype and so powerful for artists particularly?
Well, the Fool is the first card in the major arcana of the tarot. I'm calling them major arcana because I really can't bring myself to call them trumps at the moment. You know, it's sort of, but the Fool is card 0, and it's the first one. And it shows this idiot, really. He's just kind of, he's about to step off of a cliff. He doesn't appear to have a care in the world. And yeah, that looks like it's inviting ruin. But the thing about the Fool is that he or she, it's always depicted as a male, but it's, gender isn't an important thing in the tarot. It's all symbolic. So he or she is just trusting the winds to carry him or her wheresoever they will. So he's not just stepping off of a cliff to destruction. And I think a lot of us, we probably find similar moments in our own lives. I mean, I can remember back when I was, 23, 24, we were sort of living on a sink estate, and it seemed suicidal to actually give up the boring but comfortable job that I had. with a baby on the way. It didn't seem like a good idea, especially for something as precarious as a career in any sort of art. And yet, you have to make that jump. You have to actually do it blind. And there is the temptation not to jump. I mean, I remember one of the things that I did was immediately after quitting my day job, I started this ridiculous science fiction epic that I was going to write and draw and letter myself. It would have gone on for several volumes, for years. It was this immense universe-spanning story. And after about 6 months, I'd got one page with the inking sort of complete, and I'd got a page of pencils, and I'd got some notes, and I thought, this really isn't working, is it? And I thought, why are you doing this? You're never going to finish this, are you? You haven't got the talent, you haven't got the skill to finish this. Why are you doing this? And I thought, you're doing this so that you don't have to finish it, so that you don't have to send it in, so that you don't have to face the fear of rejection. And I think a lot of people do that because what I was thinking, and this is idiotic, I was thinking, well, if I don't actually finish this thing, don't send it in, then I'll still have the dream, won't I? I'll still have the dream that I could have been a contender, you know? And then I thought, that is ridiculous. That is sacrificing any possible career because, what, you're a bit nervous about being rejected? Don't be frightened of rejection. Don't be frightened of failure. Fear and desire, they tend to get in the way. Just do it. Just take that step off of the cliff and you will find that you can fly like a bird.
So many artists I've worked with as a producer have this point where they have to leap into the abyss and they need to find their fearless wings, especially the more established artists, because maybe they got further where they're looking down. That can be really terrifying. I found that what I can do to help artists find their courage is to give them confidence. What would you advise the artists? There's a lot of artists here. How would you counsel them in addressing their fears and finding their courage?
Well, I suppose it doesn't hurt if you've got a frighteningly vast ego. That will take you some of the way. It's no, actually, I don't know how big an ego I've actually got. I don't worry about it. I think that that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, confidence, it will come from simply doing something right, something that is at least maybe a tenth of what you wanted from that picture, that piece of music. And once you've got that, no, you're not there yet, but you've got an indication that with a little bit more work, you could maybe be 2/10 of the way to the level that you want to be at. And you just keep working at it. Don't bother yourself with fears or with self-consciousness. That's a bit of an indulgence. That is not actual work, is it? You know, that is work avoidance. And we're all lazy bastards. We are. We would sort of rather do anything than the thing that we've spent all of our lives wanting to do. You know, we will try to avoid that. That's fine. Just know what you're doing. I mean, like when you're about to start a project, I remember reading, was it Sid Field? He wrote a brilliant book about writing screenplays. And he said, when you start writing your screenplay, you're going to notice that your studio, it really could use a bit of a clean out. That'll take you till sort of maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not really worth starting then, you know. So tomorrow, that'll be a good time to start. Well, actually, you've got that thing tomorrow, but perhaps the day after. And yeah, then you'll think, oh, all my pencils are blunt, I better sharpen them all. And this is all avoidance. Just get it out your system. Don't even feel guilty about it. Everybody does it. Just wait till you've stopped avoiding it. Wait till you are so sick of yourself. You are so guilty. You are so sort of racked with self-loathing that you simply cannot avoid that work anymore. And then sit down and you'll find 10 minutes later, oh, actually, this is fun, isn't it? I'm really enjoying this. This is great. This is what I live for. Just do it. Just do it. You don't need to make a big song and dance about it. Just do it.
Fantastic. Staying on this subject, living creatively, creating a creative life. It's an achievement. You've achieved it. Cup or sword, or both. Push or pull.
Always both.
Always.
Now,
both.
now the cup and the sword. To return to tarot,
Yeah.
all of the 4 suits in tarot, they represent the 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth, which also represent 4 human qualities, which are will, which are compassion, which are intellect, and which are the material world and how well you deal with it. So the sword and the cup, yeah, of course you need intellect, but if you've got intellect and no compassion, you'll be, what, an intellectual monster at best, and there will be nothing of the human in your work. There will be no love, there will be no feeling, there will be nothing that other people recognize. However, if you're using the cup and no sword, then you will just be wallowing, won't you? You'll be wallowing in your emotions, and you will not be using them for anything particularly useful. You won't be putting them to any good use. You won't be, say, putting all of your passion behind a project or all of your anger behind a project. You'll just be expending those emotions fairly uselessly, unless they are directed by an intellect. So use every part of yourself in what you do. These are your materials: earth, water, fire, and air. And if you're going to be a writer or a magician, because I don't really think there's much difference between the terms, then you are going to be standing there amongst falling rocks and gouts of fire and water spouts and crashing waves and enormous cyclones of wind, and you will somehow have to combine all of those elements to make a character, a story. If you're creating a vivid, breathing human being, yeah, give them a body, give them a material existence, but give them emotions and give them an intellect and give them their own individual will. You know, you've got to use everything. Use all of the weapons at your disposal.
Amazing. And then going back to what you said earlier, and something I read, that fear and desire, two sides of the same coin, chaos, order, hope and gain. How do you balance, where do you find the wisdom to balance these diametric opposites?
Well, I think the best way is to understand that fear and desire are both projections. They're not real. They are only projections that you are making, and they're pretty much equivalent to each other. Your desire for a peaceful world is probably exactly equivalent to your fear of a warlike world. Your fear and your desire, actually, the world isn't paying any attention to them. It hasn't noticed. So fear and desire will not accomplish anything. What they will do is to create two huge spectres that are pretty well constantly warring with each other and are thus expending all of your energy, so that you will never escape that thing that you fear, and you will never get that thing that you desire. The best thing to do is to let those two qualities somehow annihilate each other, somehow cancel each other out, and to... Aleister Crowley said a lot of really, really silly things, but he said some very beautiful and true things as well. One of the things he said was that our best actions are those that we make without lust of result. And I think that that is very true. The very best things we do, we're not frightened of them failing. We're not desirous of them succeeding. We're just doing them. And I know that, yeah, I'm starting to sound like a kind of a Nike advert, aren't I? I didn't mean to do that, but yeah, you don't need fear and desire. Worrying about things will not prevent them from happening. And they probably weren't going to happen anyway, and you just wasted a lot of time worrying about them. And if they did happen, you still wasted a lot of time worrying about them. You might as well have been having a good time until the piano fell on your head, for example, you know?
Fantastic. Yeah, let's give it up, Alan Moore. Okay, so fear and desire. We want to, like the Tibetan Tantric Buddhist phrase that comes to mind, the annihilation of the false ego. As artists, creatives, we have to address these issues. A big issue always for artists is this balance between authenticity and originality. Coming back to the earlier part of the conversation of mythology and archetypes, what's your take on that? How can artists become more authentic, and the idea of originality, or originality versus authenticity?
Yeah, if you're going to be more authentic, you have to be more original. I'm looking at the art movements of the early 20th century, you know, like symbolism, surrealism, cubism. Now, what they were trying to do was to actually present something that was more real than reality. The cubists were absorbing all of this stuff about fourth dimensional mathematics. They were thinking, well, if this is a 4D universe, then if time is an illusion, then you should be able to see the front of someone's face if they're looking at you. And if they turn their head in profile, you should be able to see them both at the same time. The surrealists were trying to look at the unconscious sort of substrate of our reality, the dreams and impulses that underlie all of this real stuff. The symbolists were doing a very similar thing. These were all trying to be more authentic, not more fantastic. By being more original, they were being more authentic. And if you want an authentic voice, you should probably, these days, it will probably require quite a lot of artifice. It's very difficult to just say, right, I'm going to just write what I want, and that will be me. That will be me being authentic. No, it won't. It'll probably just be sloppy rubbish. You know, to be authentic, you have to push yourself in the way that the Cubists, the Surrealists, and the Symbolists were doing. You have to find a new way to authentically articulate what reality feels like at the moment. And it feels pretty strange at the moment. I mean, one would hope that this situation would throw up a lot of artists and writers and musicians and filmmakers who were sufficient to their times, because these are extraordinary times, and an awful lot of art, it's kind of, it seems to be paralyzed. It seems to be marking time. It seems as if we sped through the 20th century and we were very eager to get to a kind of a promised Jetsons science fiction future where we'd all have rocket packs and flying cars and all the rest of it. So we hurried through the 1950s with all of those kind of Buck Rogers tail fins on the cars. We hurried through the 60s with the moon landing and all of that space age kind of stuff on television. And we thought, we can't wait for the future. The future's going to be dead exciting. And then around about 1990, 1995, we thought, oh, hang on, this is the future, isn't it? And there aren't any rocket packs, and this is a lot more complicated than we were imagining. And it's as if we froze on the spot and decided to culturally mark time. I mean, not everybody. There's always going to be artists who are doing the real work of artists. But a lot of culture. Around about the mid-1990s, we got Britpop, which was, with the honourable exception of Jarvis Cocker, which was largely just recycling the English guitar bands of the 60s and 70s. And this is not just music. You see it in a lot of our culture. I mean, how many of the most watched films at the moment are franchises that were made up to entertain the 12-year-old boys of 50 years ago? That's like most of them. We need stuff that is sufficient to the present day. We need stuff that is authentic, but we need new ways of actually framing that authentic voice. Authenticity is a lot more work than it looks.
It's like with music, sometimes when artists try and be original, they sound like a cliche. And when they try and sound like something they really love, they sound really unique. There's a kind of paradox to it. Yeah. But I think that works culturally, and that, you know, listening to Jamie Reid earlier talk about his inspirations with the Suburban Press, how he and Malcolm McLaren have been inspired by the Situationists, And you can go back further to the beatniks, from the beatniks to the situationists, Paris 20s, to the Druids, to our mythological archetypes, and find a lot of inspiration there that can inform your work. It's a merry dance being creative, I think, and it's cup and sword. Again, you have to learn how to yield and when to push.
Well, I mean, I'd say that one of the things about being creative is that you suddenly realise that you are, when you're sitting there, you're trying to write your story and it's just not coming right, or you're trying to draw your picture and, I don't know, it's a picture of a horse, and you think, hang on, how do their legs, do their knees go backwards, or what is that? And whatever your problem is, one of the great things about creativity is that you know that there was probably someone in the Paleolithic era who was having exactly that same problem, and that probably every great artist who has ever lived has had exactly that problem that you are having right now. The same is true of writing, the same is true of music, and you suddenly become aware of the glorious continuum that you are a part of. And whatever level you're doing art on, because that is largely bullshit, there isn't really any differentiation between a published writer and an unpublished writer, except that one of them is published and is probably living quite comfortably and the other isn't. But there is no difference in the work. You know, Emily Dickinson's poems, they weren't discovered till long after she was dead. William Blake went to the grave with only one review in a newspaper, and that said that he was an unfortunate lunatic, you know? So, however bad you're feeling about how your art is going, remember, William Blake was despised and discounted during his life, and he really didn't give a fuck. He didn't care because, as he said, well, the angels in the before time are great admirers of my work, and the angels in the after time are also great admirers of my work. So why should I be worried if in the here and now time I am completely ignored? Now that is courage. Yeah. That is immense bravery and strength. And if William Blake could go to his grave, he was singing. He was making up songs while he was dying. Here I am, I'm William Blake, I'm dying, or something like that. He was a man who was creative right up until the very last. So if he could do that, what is your excuse? You know?
And that's so relevant today in a social media society where everybody's seeking approval for what they're doing. So that's great. Now, art, culture, communities, psychedelics, rarely does an art movement happen without a community or a scene beside it. What comes first?
That's a good question. I think that what happens first is everything in at least one aspect turns to shit. That in alchemy, there's a stage called the nigredo, which is also known as the putrefaction. And it's also known as the black crow. And this is the stage before gold is produced. And no, they couldn't really produce gold. It was all metaphorical. But this is the stage before the metaphorical gold is produced, where everything in the alembic, in the crucible, everything becomes black and foul and depressing, and you know that it's not going to work. You know that the whole process is doomed. It's a failure. That's when it works. You probably need socially. I mean, you know, look, the 70s and the late 70s, the early 80s, when things were about as miserable as they could possibly get, these are the things that incite great art. Great art is always at its greatest in opposition. And I'd say what I am seeing now, this is starting to look like a counterculture to me. And I think that whenever things get as bad as they possibly can, I think that's when art and culture kick in. Now, I don't think there is any one thing that happens first. I think that there's just this sense of unbearable social and artistic temperament. There's this sense of oppression, and then that will inevitably result in people forging communications between each other, organizing into new networks. Yet we don't have to decide just yet how we're all going to dress. You know, we don't have to decide what our favorite drug is just yet. We don't have to decide Blur or Oasis just yet. You know, we can wait and see how this thing evolves. We can let it evolve naturally. It seems to be doing quite a good job on its own so far. Just don't stand in the way of any of this. Just let it happen. And I'm sure that it will evolve its own music, its own poetry, its own wonderful, sexy hairstyles, you know? It's, yeah, it'll look after itself. I think once it's got the impetus behind it, counterculture looks after itself.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think that means everybody here should throw a party, basically, get everyone involved. Okay, what sets you free?
What sets me free? Actually making the decision that I really didn't want to be in prison. What set me free was deciding at roughly the age of 25 that, yeah, actually, no one's going to help you, are they? And at the same time, nobody is particularly trying to hinder you. So you haven't got anybody else to blame. You know, you're not going to be able to say, oh, well, if I hadn't come from a poor background, I could maybe have done, or if I hadn't have had this happen or that happen, you know, those are just excuses. It's when you realize that it is just you in the universe and that it is not necessarily hostile or benign. It is neutral to you. And when you realize that it is all up to you, yes, it perhaps will take a lot of work, but that's down to you. If you want this thing badly enough, you will be prepared to do the work. That is incredibly liberating when you suddenly realize that for better or for worse, it is going to be you who saves your life or ruins it. I think that that is very liberating. Stop blaming other people, stop blaming institutions, don't say it's society's fault. It probably is society's fault, but it won't benefit you to think like that, you know?
We can all worry a lot about what other people think of us and our work, but the reality is they're not thinking of us at all. So you might as well just get on and do it anyway.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. What keeps you going, and where do you find your inspiration today? What are you reading? What are you listening to?
Well, you know those sensory deprivation tanks where you kind of float in them and you can't feel anything or hear anything or see anything? I'm a bit like that with culture, in that I don't have any connection to any online activity, don't even possess a mobile phone. And also, because I'm a bit deaf, I don't listen to an awful lot of music.
Do you correspond and write letters?
No, I feel guilty about the number of letters that are still waiting for replies. But there is some fantastic stuff out there. Just the fact that I am not particularly maybe seeing it. We heard the other day, me and Melinda were listening to the Sleaford Mods, and I was very, very impressed. That is fierce, powerful music. In terms of books, I've become completely infatuated with David Foster Wallace, who died in, I think, 2008, took his own life. But I am in love. I am completely besotted. Let's just talk about David Foster Wallace for the rest of the evening. He's like people like Thomas Pynchon, and the way that they excited me back in the 80s or whatever, earlier than that, the 70s. He is a writer who he's found a modern voice, a modern way to use language, and he talks about things that are very uniquely modern psychological states, and he's very, very funny. And he has really, really irritating footnotes in his novels. Every, say, 10 lines, there'll be a little number, and you have to look to the back of the book. And like, this book's about 1,000 pages long. I only read it because I felt a bit guilty about having written Jerusalem, and and I thought, I've got to show that I can take it as well as dish it out. And so I was going through all of these footnotes, and I thought, this is really aggravating, especially because if you don't read the footnotes, you won't understand the novel. And when I got to one footnote, he'd had an unusual turn of phrase from a character, and then it had got 653 or something. It's a very long book. And I'd looked to the back, and under 653, it just said, not a clue. And I thought, he's deliberately doing this to annoy me. I really, really respect that. You know, that is, and yeah, since then, I've been his willing slave, you know. But yeah, there are some great films being made. There is some great music being made. There is some great books. It's just that we need to resist this attempt to enforce a monoculture upon us. We need to stand up for things that aren't the most popular choice in the nation. You know, things that are popular are usually rubbish. The Sun is, I believe, still the most popular newspaper, you know? So, yeah, let's forget about popularity. Let's forget about how many people like us, you know? Let's forget about what our ratings are. that stuff's not important. Yeah, we have to buckle down and yeah, ignore all of that stuff.
I don't know if you've read John Higgs's book, Burning of the Million Quid, KLF, and when I was 21 I experienced a sort of intense LSD meltdown and ended up on the King's Road in a kimono, burning money. Why is that such a powerful act, burning money today? And why has it become a theme of these events, do you think?
Well, I mean, when Bill and Jimmy brought their film of the KLF burning $1 million, when they brought out the book of that, as was noted in John's book about the KLF, they'd got a list of the venues, and there were various, there were universities, I think there were prisons, public schools, anarchist groups, and then about 2/3 of the way down the list it said Alan Moore's living room. And yet I had Bill and Jimmy and a bunch of other people all turn up at my house, set up the projector, and then show me the film of them burning £1 million in a ruined cottage on the Isle of Jura. And I thought it was great. I mean, partly because I really do like to see a movie where you can see every penny of the budget up there on the screen, you know. And also because I could see what they were doing. What they were saying was, this is just paper, they were choosing a very expensive way of saying that, but they were saying, look, this is the stuff that is enslaving all of you. If you don't have enough of it, you'll die. If you have too much of it, you will become somebody who can control the destinies of millions. So what we're doing is, we're burning it. That is so liberating, because money is code for everything. Everything in the world apparently has its price. So money represents the world, the material world. That's why discs or coins are that particular suit of the tarot. So to actually say that money has no power, that money has no worth, that is really socially blasphemous. I mean, where would we be if we all thought like that? It devalues the all-powerful image of money. Hell, I mean, like the notes when I was a kid, which didn't have any animal fats in them, to the best of my knowledge, they all said that they would promise to pay the bearer goods to the equivalent of £1. Originally, they were supposed to pay you that amount in gold. I mean, Gordon Brown sold off the gold reserves in about 2007, but we never had enough gold to pay off all of those notes. It's imaginary. And particularly today, where the physical money isn't real, it's largely just electric impulses passing through the ether. So I thought that money burning, I mean, right there, you've got the blazing death of capitalist civilization, haven't you? You know?
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got to finish soon, but before we do, what I loved about John's book and your books is you create this, this new mythology out of your sources, and it reminds me of William Blake's idea that you have to create your own system or be enslaved by another's. And I think that's fantastic. I think burning money is a way of freeing yourself from those ties. But creating your own mythology today, everyone here is creating their own mythology today in a way.
I think that stuff's going to take care of itself. Again, I was talking the other night with Melinda, and I was saying that I can feel a kind of future mythology settling over a lot of the connected events, the artistic, cultural events that are happening at this very interesting time. I can see the same kind of mythology that surrounded, say, the Beat movement, you know, with Burroughs and Kerouac and Ginsberg. The same mythology that surrounded the early psychedelic movement with Kesey and the Pranksters and things like that. I can feel that kind of mythology settling into place, particularly with events like this one today. I can feel that these might be the human beings of 50 years' time. Let's all try and get back here in 2067 and see how this has all worked out.
Great. Okay. Well, let's have a big hand for Alan Moore.
And also for youth.
And everyone from Super Weird Happening who's organised and brought us all together. Thank you.